Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. So on today's video, what we're going to be doing is continuing our transmission swap, the W55 manual transmission swap on my IS300. So what I'm going to be doing today is prepping the transmission tunnel, cutting that thing out, and then putting in that new piece from the manual so it raises it up for the shifter. In addition, I'll go over what we need to do underneath the car to do the wiring for the reverse lights and the neutral safety if you guys have to do it this way. If you saw one of my previous videos, I already did all the interior wiring and I took care of the neutral safety switch, but if you guys are lazy and want to just bypass that, I'll show you how to do it today. So stay tuned. Alright, so I got my tunnel here, the manual tunnel, and I scraped off that layer of metal right here along with that seam sealer right there just to get it cleaned up. So what I'm going to do now, I'm going to go ahead and just cut it right here before this hole. I'm going to use that hole and the hole on the automatic as a reference point. Then on this side, you can see the lip that the last person that got this from me, they cut it down right below there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just trim it right above here. I just want it to be just flat enough where I could get some rivets or some bolts into the existing housing or existing tunnel and I can mount it. So I just want to trim that down a little right now. Alright, I decided to coat this thing with some primer. I'm going to put a coat of paint on it to match my car, just to keep the corrosion down, and this thing is pretty much good to go to put in the car. So I gave the tunnel a nice coat of color match graphite gray pearl. I'm going to go ahead and drill the holes to match for the rivets and everything once I get it into the car and test fit it. Once I finish with the rivets and all that, I might have to coat it again just to get all the bare edges before I seam seal it and rivet it onto the car. So we're inside the car now. You can see everything's taken apart. If you guys don't know how to take this interior apart, you probably shouldn't be doing this swap. I've got a bunch of other videos where I've taken this interior apart several times to do stuff here, so you can just check those out if you need to know how to get into here. Yeah, you just basically take off the armrest here, which requires two 12mm bolts here, 2 screws there, pop the cover off here, and then get the 2 screws back here behind the dash to take the whole thing apart, including the shift boot and everything. Once we're in here, we want to take apart this whole automatic transmission shifter assembly. The easiest way to do that is just 2 10mm back here, and then 2 more up front takes that off. And then on this side, there's a couple of harnesses that you got to unplug right here and back here. So you unplug those harnesses along with any other harnesses that might be hidden underneath. Just take the whole thing out and we should be good to go there. So we were able to take this thing out. It was a little bit tricky at first just because that harness right there has 2 little clips that clip into these holes on the side there that you have to get off. So I had to pop the cover off of here. Initially I was going to try to take apart the whole thing, but those 4 screws that hold this whole assembly together are kind of stuck. They're actually Loctited on, so you can't even unscrew them easily, as you can see from the bottom here. But now that we're in here, we go ahead and start prepping everything. I've already marked the spot underneath where I'm going to cut, which is right about here. It's about 12 inches from this hole to that spot right here that I marked. So I'm gonna go ahead underneath with the grinder, cut it up to get the hole through here, or I might just drill a hole and then get the reciprocating saw in here to cut it, which is gonna be much easier to cut with the reciprocating saw. I was able to unplug the harness from here and undo all this stuff and kind of put it off to the side right now so it doesn't get damaged or anything when I'm working on here. And I placed the new tunnel into here just to see how everything fit. So I lined it up with that hole right there. Back here, it snaps in perfectly and actually sits right into that groove perfectly, right? Up front, for some reason, right here there's a huge gap underneath, like I can put my finger through. And this is much different than all the ones that I saw online, that Infinite Iteration and a few others that I saw that actually transplanted their tunnels in. So this must be some kind of change between the different model years, maybe, that theirs were a little bit different. Because I noticed on Infinite Iteration's blog, his tunnel had a little dot right here, some kind of centering or screw or tab right here, but mine doesn't. I saw another one on the MyIS forum and they didn't have that spot, and his kind of fit. I couldn't tell from his from the low quality photos, but on mine for sure, look at that, there's a huge gap there. And it's just a totally different as far as where this cutout or where this meets. And I'm not sure if this, I don't think this thing goes further up for any reason on the manual versus the automatic. All right, before we start cutting into this, I'm gonna go ahead and drill some holes like right about here, here, and then back right before the dot where I'm using to align it back here. So that way I know exactly where to start cutting. And what I'm gonna do is use those and kind of gauge where I need to cut from underneath using both a reciprocating saw and an oscillating tool to see if I get a nice clean cut. Put this little cardboard right here to just kind of protect the carpet and everything around here when I'm cutting and drilling into this thing. Got all the holes drilled, as you can see there. So I'm gonna go ahead and underneath the car, start the pilot holes. Underneath, you guys can see the holes there. So we'll go ahead and get the reciprocating saw out or the oscillating tool and start cutting into this. All right, we got everything scored right there, so it's enough for me to get the blade in for the reciprocating saw from the top. So we'll go back up top. So I'm gonna just go ahead, take the reciprocating saw, get it right into those little holes I already cut, and just finish the cut all the way through. All right, got everything cut out. It's just hanging by a thread now. Go ahead, just cut those little last pieces and this thing should fall right through. There, just hanging by a little piece right here. Just wiggle it back and forth. We're gonna have to go ahead, get the grinder, clean up some of these edges before we finalize this install, but it should be good. So that's gonna be hanging there. Just cut that little piece and yeah, just square this thing up, clean it up a little bit before I get everything in. So we got everything cleaned up. I used the grinder just to get all the edges a little bit cleaner, less sharp. Once I have the seam sealer in place, you won't be able to see or tell any of the edges anyways. I'm gonna pretty much put a bunch of that on there, and then I'm gonna put some of this like rhino liner looking stuff on it too, just to clean it up and make it more OEM. On that spot right there, I'm about to put some foam or something just to build up that edge. Once I put that seam sealer all in that spot just to seal it up. So I'm in here. I put a little bolt here for the alignment so this thing doesn't move. I'm gonna go ahead and drill some holes so I can get the screws and everything in here and the rivets. What I decided to do is I'm gonna use some Rivnuts over here and here to hold this back part. And on the front, I'm gonna do the same just because that huge gap, I can't really get a rivet in there. So I'm gonna use some Rivnuts with a 10mm. I'll show you what the tool I'm gonna be using in a second to do that. But I figured 2 of those would be fine. Right here, I got this Rivnut tool from Amazon. I think I paid like 25-30 bucks for this kit. It came with all the Rivnuts, or at least a starter pack of them, and different sizes. So we're gonna need an M6, which is this one right here for the 10mm. It does come with standard sizes, which would be useless for me. It does come with M8, M10, and then M5. So in order to do this, what I'm gonna do first is I'm gonna drill a 1/4 inch hole. This is basically an M6 or a 10mm bolt. And then I'm gonna drill this odd size. It's like a 23/32 or something, or 23/64, and this one is the same diameter as this guy. It's a weird size. I had to make sure that this thing fit perfectly so that way I could just drill it exactly, and then I could push it through and then pull it nice and tight. so I got those first 2 holes drilled. I'm gonna go ahead and put the rev nuts in here and pull that through, and then that way I could tighten these things down while I do the front ones and it doesn't shift or move. All right, so I got those 2 over there up front. This one, I kind of missed the mark a little bit on my initial drill, but I made it work. It's a little bit offset, but it should still screw in. I had to make the hole bigger on the actual tunnel. Over here, I measured it first and then I drilled it, and this one fits perfectly right there on that spot. So that's gonna hold the 2 front. This is gonna hold the 2 rear. That should provide much of the pull down once I put in the actual seam sealer. So I ended up bolting all 4 of them in, and it actually holds it much better now. I don't think I'm gonna do those rivets anymore. That's just more work and more holes to seal up. A seam sealer is gonna act like a glue, and it's also gonna seal it from any moisture or anything getting in here, so that's gonna be good there. I'm gonna go ahead and put neoprene on the top and bottom here and sandwich it in with some seam sealer, and then seam seal this little edge right here between the hump for this spot. So to fill that gap that has right here on the front edge of this, I found this little weather stripping that I had. It's like a neoprene with some 3M tape on the back. I'm gonna put a layer right here, and I'm gonna put a layer on the car side. When they sandwich together with a seam sealer, it should provide a pretty good seal. So this is what it looks like right there with that neoprene, and also right here. So once I put it on, it should fill that gap pretty much nice and solid and tight. Maybe a little bit too much, but good enough. To do the seam seal, I'm gonna be using this AC Delco medium body seam sealing compound right here. It's a straight 1-step seam sealer. It's not your usual 2-in-1 or epoxy base where it's 2 mixed together. This one just goes on like a caulk, and this should seal pretty well. Once we get inside, I'll show you what I did to mask this thing off to give it a nice clean seam. So inside the car, what I did was I masked off the actual new piece right here, and then the body right here all around. That way I give it a nice clean area. When I squeeze the seam sealer out, I could take a squeegee or something and do a nice clean tape all around the edges and get it evenly, and anywhere where there's any missing, I'll just add a little bit more seam sealer and just spread it out, and then once I peel the tape, I'll have a nice clean line, very OEM finish looking. Apply this stuff on here liberally so we can get a nice squeeze out of it. Once we got that thing laid out and we're good with the spread, we'll go ahead and just tuck this thing on the top here. Just be careful not to get too much on the top surface. Make sure we get a nice clean seal. Line it up with the back side here. So good with that. We're gonna put the bolts in. And once we put the bolts in, I'm gonna put another layer on top to make sure that we get it cleaned and sealed up. So we got a little bit of squeeze out of the sides once I tightened it down. So I'm gonna go ahead and, like I said, add a little bit more, spread it out with a little card, and then peel the tape, and then I'm gonna go to the underside and do the same thing. I got it pretty decent up here. Not the greatest seam sealing job, but we'll never be able to see this anyways under all the cover. I just need to do a little bit of cleanup once it's all dried up. But other than that, I'm gonna get on the underside now, make sure everything down there is nice and sealed. So we're underneath here, and that's a squeeze that we initially got out of there. So I'm gonna go ahead and just keep on filling it up and then doing a little bit of the same on top by spreading it out evenly, cover up all those little spots. I'm gonna end up putting a texture coating on this anyways, but I just want to make sure it's all sealed up. I peeled that tape off, kind of spread it a little bit. The tape didn't really work out as well as I thought, but oh well. Once I let this thing dry and put a little bit of texture coating on here, it should look like OEM, like this stuff right over here, so we should be good with that. So we sprayed this undercoating on the underside, and you can see it turned out pretty good. This looks almost freaking OEM as hell. Look at this. Look at all the rubberized texture. Matches the coating perfectly, as you can see here. Then on the top side, I decided to paint this graphite gray pearl to match the center part here that I already painted outside the car. So I went ahead and painted the seam sealer so everything matches this, and it looks OEM at first glance. Seams turned out pretty well considering my half-ass spread of the seam sealer, but everything turned out pretty good. All right, we're underneath. As you can see, the transmission wire harness we took out is just hanging here now. I took off all the clips and everything because I'm gonna go ahead and just tuck it up there. This is useless now once we go on a swap, so some of you can actually just cut this thing right here and probably get rid of it. Maybe you want to cap those wires, make sure they don't short out for any reason. The only thing you really need is the wires out of here. So as you can see right here, on the back of it, all the pin numbers are actually numbered 1 through 9. So it starts right there 1, it goes across to 5, then it starts over at 6, 7, 8, and 9. So what we want to do is take those two red and blues right there, or red, blue, and red and black. So those are the reverse wires right there, the power and then the signal to the ECU for the reverse. So you could just cut that out and extend it to the harness to plug into your manual transmission, and that gets you your reverse signal. If you guys watched my previous video, I've already hijacked the neutral safety inside the car, and I've already wired that to the clutch. But if you guys were to do this without doing it the hard way like I did on my last video or my previous wiring video for this swap, all you have to do is just take the black wire on the 6 and the 9, there's on the two ends right there, the ones with the brown insulation, go ahead and just pull those out or cut those and then tap them together or just connect them together, and that basically jumps the neutral safety, and now you can just start the car whenever you want without the clutch. Other than that, the rest of these wires on here are useless. They're just part of the gear shift selector. All right, so what I did was I pulled the whole harness up around all the pipes and wiring and everything down here just to bring it into this area where the clutch master cylinder is, and I brought the harness up here so I could work on it easier. So up here what I'm going to do is I'm going to snip those two reds, the red and black and the red and blue, and once I snip those, I'm going to go ahead and try to pull it out somewhere midway through the harness here, and I'm going to pull those two wires down, loom those two wires, and then plug those into the new transmission. Then the rest of this I'm just gonna end up taping and then wrapping up and just kind of tucking it down here in this area and just leaving it. If you want to, you could actually just cut all these wires near the intake manifold where it joins the rest of this harness and it goes to the ECU. I've seen some other people go through this and they'll cut all those wires and they'll remove all the plug wires that go into the automatic side or the automatic plug, but that's totally optional and you don't really need to do that if you don't have the time or the expertise to figure out and trace all the wires. But right now I'm just going to do it the easy way, tuck this down here, it won't hurt anybody. I was able to pull that red and black and red and blue out, and I kept on tracing it as far as I could down to the loomed out there. You can see I could kind of pulled it out to try to trace it. Once you get past this little joint right here, you run into another set of red and black and red and blue wires. So you guys gotta be careful with those, that you're pulling the right one. What I did was I pulled it out a little bit. If there was a little bit of resistance, then I tested it by pulling this thing back to see if it pulled back. If it didn't, then it wasn't that wire. So I just found the next red and black or red and blue combination, and I yanked on it and it pulled this side, and I just yanked it all the way through. So once I get it all down there, I'm gonna tape that all back up, pull these two wires down to the bottom, and then we'll get to the bottom and actually put the plug on it. Actually, I could do it up here. I think I have more than enough slack with this. End up putting the new plug right here, up here with it where it's easy. So as far as the OEM plug goes, on the other side on the switch, I have an OEM plug, and then I was able to locate the other side of it, which is this plug right here. I came with brand new pins and some seal. So what we do is we just put this through, crimp that right there. I'll probably end up soldering that just to make sure that crimp is good, because I don't have the correct tool that crimps it like OEM factory. Should be able to clamp that down as tight as you can with some pliers, and then just solder it just to get it nice and tight before we stick it back in here and have a nice OEM plug. If you guys need the part number or the website that I got these from, I'll go ahead and put down the links down in the description to go check that out. I'll also have the part numbers on this. This one's a little bit different than the usual Tyco ones, so I had to locate it from a different site. This is the same one that's used in Suzuki motorcycles, and I've actually seen this plug before in my Suzuki GSXR days. So we got the two wires up here now that we measured everything and made sure the length is enough. So what I'm gonna do is just strip these back. I think this is an 18 gauge wire. So strip them back, just enough to go into the new pins. Once we do that, you want to basically get this in there so the main part of the pin goes in the center here, and then the back part you want to go into the insulation, and then you got to get some needle nose pliers and just fold those things in so that way it holds it. This thing on this little soldering station. Let's heat this up. Dang it, I forgot to put the little rubbers in before I did it, so now I gotta squeeze it through the hole. Luckily it's a very malleable rubber, it'll just squeeze right through, but would have been easier before I had these connectors on. Alright, once you get there, just slide them in. They only go one way, so just make sure you have the right orientation. Snap in. It doesn't matter which side's which, because all it is closing the circuit. So you want to do that. Then you want to go ahead and just squeeze the tail in, the rubber seals in. We should be good there. Put the loom on, run it downstairs. And then what I'm going to do is when I do the clutch line, I'm going to go ahead and run the clutch line and this together towards the bottom. That way I have it all wire managed. All right, we're under the car. I was able to wire manage that wire right there back into the loom, and I actually clipped it back on the back side of the intake manifold. And it just goes down. So I actually used some of the wire management for the starter power and everything right here. And I'm just gonna bring it right down to here. And since I clipped it off the existing transmission, this thing is the same exact length as the transmission spots. This should line up with the transmission reverse switch on the manual right here, so we should be good here. So I'll go ahead and call it quits on this video for right now, and we'll proceed with the next part, which is going to be putting on the flywheel, the pilot bearing, the clutch, and everything, and then hopefully I can get the transmission in right after that. Hey guys, thanks for tuning in all the way to the end of this video on doing that transmission tunnel as part of my manual swap, along with the reverse lights. As you can see, it does take a little bit of work just to get that tunnel in correctly, if you even have access to that tunnel. If you don't have access to that tunnel, you still have to trim a little bit just to get that vent. You could do the swap without it, but you just have to find a way to fill that little gap. They do make aftermarket 3D printed versions that raise that tunnel up and mounts to the factory holes. You just gotta trim that vent out. It'll basically allow you to use the rubber boot as the OEM IS300 and then have your shifter and everything line up correctly. If you guys found this video useful, give it a thumbs up. If you guys aren't following me already on this build or anything I'm doing around the garage, go ahead and subscribe to the channel, turn on bell notifications to get notified every time I upload. Remember guys, for all these different projects, if I can do it, you guys can do it. I want to thank you for watching, and I'll talk to you guys next time.